And welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 263. Today we're going to be having a feedback session. So we had a couple of people send in their images, so we're going to be talking through them, helping help go through the photos and help work out how they might have been better or different or whatever. So yeah, stick around. If you're watching live, leave a comment down below, let me know you're here, and we can make a start. Yes, and welcome to episode 263. Today, yes, is a feedback session. So, like I say, if you happen to be watching live, leave a comment, click like. That's always a good one for the algorithms. Yeah, let me know where you are. Let me know where you're from, what the weather's doing. Get the chat started. I see we've got a bit of chat going already, so join in with everybody. If you're not watching live, but you happen to be watching the recording, so you can still leave a comment. It's just I won't be able to respond in real time. But yes, there is a chat box for the live ones, so live views. Yes, so today, like I say, is a feedback session. And so, yeah, that's quite interesting. Robert and Nicola have both sent in images, and we're going to be going through those. Yeah, first of all, I can see we've got a couple of viewers in already, so let's see who we've got. So Lisa says, hello from Maryland. April joins us from a sunny day in Long Island, New York. You know, I quite often we get a sunny day in Long Island, New York. It's always good to hear, especially when it's a bit kind of dull, overcast and a bit cold here in Scotland. Oh yeah, Lisa says that she's got also sun with cool and crisp air, very nice. And then Susan says, hi from a sunny Kirkcudbright, a bit windy though. All right, okay, Kirkcudbright's just 9 miles down the road, but it's sunny there, but it's cloudy and overcast here. Where are we? Okay, so little bits of chat going on between Lisa, April and Susan chatting about the weather. Oh, Janet's joined us from a sunny, chilly Mississauga in Canada. And John says hello from Ohio. So, welcome, yes. Right, quick update on the Smug Points, and then we can make a start. So, basically what happened was, what are we? So, it's 2nd November. So, the accumulated Smug Points for October meant that Robert was our winner. So, Robert accumulated 60, total of 6, Robert in Texas, a total of 60 Smug Points. Runner up very, very close. Both April and Susan came in a very close second with 55 Smug Points, with Janet in third place at 50, Marilyn and Nicola at 45, and Robert Schaefer at 40. Marilyn's joined us from Colorado, says hello. So yes, so that's kind of, now what that means is Robert having won the Smug Points challenge or accumulation for October means that he's decided to, we've been chatting back and forth about what we're going to be doing for the November challenge. Now, interestingly, November is a 5 podcast month, 5 Sundays in November. So as well as a couple of feedback sessions and the topic of the month and then the challenge coming from the topic of the month, we've got a spare one as well, which Robert's also come up with some ideas for. So stick around. At the end of the podcast, I will tell you all about what's coming up this month. Right, okay, so let's say, I suppose we can make a start. Well, I'll tell you what, let me just minimize that, stick that over there, close that. There's always a little bit of sort of tidying the desktop up a little bit as I try to work out where everything is going to go. Now, just one other thing I want to do, which is just to take that and drag that over there as well. Okay, right. So where are we at? Susan's saying well done, Robert, and so's April. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today then is feedback session. Now, feedback, direct feedback, there's very few places on the internet or anywhere where you can get genuine feedback on your images from a professional photographer who kind of, you know, has an eye for these things for free. And here is one of the only places on the internet where you can really genuinely do that. I see places cropping up all over the place online. There's even AI feedback on some sites as well, and basically it'll tell you to straighten your horizon and turn it into black and white, or it will give you such generalized advice that by and large, it's fairly useless. You could have asked anybody. The problem is with our photos is that we tend to be so close to them that very often we can't see when something isn't wrong or why, or can tell that something isn't right, but we're not sure why. And at this point, an extra pair of eyes is extraordinarily useful. So that's what sort of brought out these sessions. And to be honest, I think it's the best way you can possibly learn. I mean, other than actually going out and taking the photos. Obviously, the more photos you take, the more skills you build, the better you train your eye. But when you kind of come up against that, I'm stuck, I'm not sure quite what's going on here, then getting feedback is certainly one of the best ways you can learn, I think. So make the most of these feedback sessions. So now, what are we going to say? So we're going to start then. Now, what happened is Robert and Nicola have both sent me stuff in. Nicola sent me 2 with the idea of pick one, but actually they're both slightly different. Although there's another common theme, but I might come back to that. And I thought actually you may well benefit from this, because the other thing about sending your images for feedback is it's not just you who sent me the image who gains from it, it's everybody else who's watching as well, because sometimes when we're looking at somebody else's photo we start to kind of see, we go, right, yeah, okay, I can see what they did wrong there, or I can see how that might have been improved there, and then suddenly a little light switches on, you go, oh, that's the problem that I had with that other photo. So it's extraordinarily useful. So when you send images for feedback, it's not just you who benefits, it's everybody else who watches these podcasts as well. So another reason for sending them in. So what we're going to do then, I think we're going to start with, where are we? We're going to start with this one with Nicola. So if I do that and do that, hopefully you should be able to see this one here. So Nicola says, this first one is one I was going to supply for the Leaves Challenge, which we had last month, but never felt comfortable with it. I like the way the light is filtering through the leaves, but was never really happy with the crop and wondered if the background light might be taking away from the main focal point in the image. I took this a while back with my old camera and sadly can't seem to find the original image. And yes, sending the original image is always useful if you're sending something in for feedback, especially if you've edited the photo, then it's useful for me to have an unedited version. If you have the raw file, even better, but at the very least a kind of an original JPEG, unedited is always useful, because it then gives me other options that I can perhaps send to you. Oh, Meg's joined us and says hello everyone. April says I like the bokeh. Oh, Viji's joined us. Welcome Viji in India. And right, so this is a rather beautiful shot, but where Nicola's kind of uncertain is in the notion, first of all, there's the crop, and also there's the bokeh is nice, but the background, those white spots are kind of grabbing the attention somewhat. We've got this beautiful cluster of leaves here with the sun coming through. But it's also perhaps potentially kind of our eyes being distracted from what we're wanting to see. And here we come into one of, I think, is the key point of where you go with photography. I think it's the most important thing you can ever understand about photography, and it's one that I've talked about so many times. I will continue to talk about again, and it will continue to talk about again, even in this with the other photos, which is, first of all, identify what is your narrative, what is your story, what is the key thing you are hoping to get across with your photo. Because every single time we take a photo, there's something, every time we bring our camera to our eye, there's something about that image that made us want to go click. And very often what we do is we go, oh, there's something there, we'll go click, 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 get back to the computer, look at the images and go, I'm not sure, there was something there. Or at the computer you suddenly realise the photo you should have taken, but maybe you didn't. But if you can identify what the key thing is, and it doesn't have to be some great big story, War and Peace or something like that. It can just be, I liked the colour combination of this and this. I like the expression on that person's face. I like the action that dog was doing. I like the way the cow in the foreground seemed to be surrounded by the silhouette of the barn in the background, or anything like that, whatever it is. But as soon as once you clearly identify what it is that you found interesting about that photo. That then informs every single decision you make afterwards. So if you can identify that at the point you're taking the photo, rather than necessarily when you're back at the computer, then it gives you a lot more options. Because once you can go, actually, what I like is about this is this object, or what I like about it is the relationship between this and that object, or what's going on between them, or the colours, or the light, or anything else, then that helps you make your next decision. Because now at this point, you can then go, well, okay, to emphasise that story, to really kind of exaggerate, or emphasize, really, there's another word, suddenly I've forgotten the word. But to ramp it up, it then allows you to know, well, okay, where do I need to place the camera in relationship with this? What bits that are distracting from this idea do I need to crop out or just not include in the shot? What settings do I want? A narrow aperture or a wide aperture? Do I want a fast shutter speed or a slow shutter speed? Do I need a higher ISO because I need more light coming in? All your decisions about what you do in the camera are going to be affected once you've clearly identified what it is about that photo that's the most important part. Likewise, though, when you come back to it you open up in your computer and your editing software, then it also becomes the same thing. What's the most important part of this? And then what can I do in the editing to highlight, to intensify that narrative? So when we look at this then, obviously what this is about the leaves in the foreground, the light catching it, and that kind of bokeh in the background. But as Nicola said, she's not quite sure exactly what bits aren't working with it. But now we know that, then we can see that what we're really wanting to do is have our attention drawn here, but it's getting slightly distracted by a fairly busy background, particularly the sort of brighter white parts of the bokeh. So first thing to do, I think, is to attend to the crop. And basically, once we've identified that it's about these leaves here in the foreground, what we want to do is crop in to really bring that story in, because there's a lot of space around here, especially this kind of large patch of orange here, which is grabbing our attention, but isn't necessarily adding that much to the narrative. So I'm kind of tempted to sort of bring this in a little bit closer. Something like this. Now, what we could also do is I quite like the diagonal lines here. But when I've talked before, another thing to remember about diagonals is it's very useful if one of the key diagonals points actually into the corner of the image rather than just missing it. It tends to sort of sit slightly more satisfyingly. So if I rotate this a little bit, something like this, and I kind of just adjust this crop slightly like this, then what we find, we can kind of move it so that this diagonal points down into this corner and this diagonal points down into that corner. And then when I hit enter, okay, I've got a little bit up here, I can just remove that. That crop somehow feels that little bit more satisfying. So we've gone from that to that, and now we're closer into the leaves. We've still got the bokeh effect, but also these diagonals are kind of just adding that sort of little bit more sort of intensity or energy to it. Now the next problem we've got is these kind of brighter patches, and it's the white that's really grabbing our attention. Now what I would suggest here, what we could do is if we create a separate a new layer, and then select a colour that we're not going to make it totally dark, but we want to kind of just pare it back. Okay, actually, I'll tell you what I'm going to, my reasoning before we get there. If I go to, say, the levels or the curves, and I just and I'm going to sort of selectively darken down oh, well, actually, we should maybe do it that way down. So I'm darkening down these bits. The problem is that it's making them grey. Okay, and yeah, we've got a rich colour here. So with that in mind, I'm not going to use the levels. What I want to do is I'm going to paint a colour on here, and the colour I'm going to select a complementary one. I might go for that kind of light greenish, kind of olivey colour, or I might go for a kind of reddish one. I want a slightly paler one though, so I'm going to sort of move into something like this. Then what I want to do is I'm going to, on a separate layer, I'm just going to find a paintbrush and I'm going to just paint over the worst of these white patches like this. Now don't worry, it's not going to stay like this. I'm going to make a couple of changes. Now it doesn't matter quite so much down the lower part, although we could still do those bits, something like that. Now obviously this looks a bit of a mess, but what we're going to do is we're going to change the blending option between this painted layer and the one below. And so if I go to something like darken, what it does is anything that's darker, anything that's lighter than the colour I've just painted gets replaced by this colour. Now, this does look a little bit odd. It's kind of got a bit green. But if I go multiply, that kind of gradates it a little bit more. That becomes a bit more interesting. Now, the problem is it's kind of gone a little bit overkill, but I can change the opacity here. I can change how much of that I want. And if I just sort of bring it down to something like that, but again, I can mask this, and in the mask, where I've kind of gone over the top and maybe don't want too much of it applying, I just kind of bring back some of the colour, something like that. Then what we've got is, you can see now that instead of it being white, it's now become a sort of slight, it's you know, again, let's see if I just maybe, you know, it's sort of a little bit more complementary. The problem is now is that the whole picture has kind of become a bit darker. So what we really want is we want to lighten or bring more attention to these front leaves. So I'm going to select all, copy, paste that onto a separate layer here, and we'll just quickly go into Camera Raw filter, where what I will do is very often if a little bit of vignette on the edges there just helps to draw the attention into the middle. I'll hit auto, see what that does. That's brightened everything up, possibly more than I actually really want brightened up, although it has kind of brightened the leaves somewhat. So in fact, actually what I might just do here is I'm just going to think about the leaves, these front leaves, and I'm going to mask them out onto the compared to the background. So if I go to the effects and maybe add a little bit of clarity and just pull out the highlights, maybe even a touch of texture, something like that. So now what we're doing is we've done this, but what I want to do is mask that off, and if I hold the Alt or key, that makes it black, covers it out. Now if I go back and paint white where I want it, you see this is now bringing through the layer that we've just created, and what I can do is I can paint that over these leaves in the foreground, which is what we've just brightened up. Okay, now I might even just bring that green up a little bit there, something like that. And so overall now what we can see is we've got much more in the way of our attention is being drawn to these leaves in the foreground. And then maybe if I could take the levels, I could even up the levels a little bit more, maybe darken down that background a little bit more, something like that, and also that central light blob there. And now what we can see is that overall the leaves at the front are standing out much better against the background. So if I just group those all into that, then what we can see is we've gone from this to this, and hopefully then that gives you a better sense of how what we've managed to do is draw attention to the leaves at the front, which is what we want. We allow the background to just get a little bit darker, and if we wanted, for that matter, we could even take a curves level and do kind of exactly almost the opposite of what we did with the levels, where we take it down, and again with the black though, paint these leaves back in so that background becomes even darker if we wanted it. But we can play around to suit whatever, and again you can adjust that as to how dark you actually want it. Maybe that's too dark like that, you want a bit of the colour that's left in there. So hopefully then that starts to give you an idea of what you can do with these leaves. So first thing we did was we cropped it. We brought the leaves to those front leaves to fill more of the picture. What we also did was we angled it so that these key diagonals, if I just do the pencil brush there, so this diagonal here is pointing to this corner, this diagonal of the leaf is pointing to this corner, and that just adds that little bit more energy to what is a still picture. You know, we talked before, verticals and horizontals create stability in the picture, diagonals add a little bit of energy to the picture. So we've cropped in closer, we've tilted it and angled it, so we've got those, and then what we've said about doing is trying to remove those detracting white spots by giving them a colour tint using a multiply overlay with a slightly paler colour, and then we've sort of highlighted the leaves at the front, we've lightened them compared to, or darkened the background, done variations of those. So hopefully then that gives you a reasonable idea of ways you can go about it, but it all starts with this notion of what is it, what's the key thing about this picture that we're trying to identify. And in this case the key thing was those leaves at the front and how they should be standing out against the bokeh of the leaves at the back. So yeah, thank you for sending that one in, Nicola. Hope that all makes sense. A couple of comments. Oh, everybody sort of makes saying hi to people and people saying hi back. Susan says, great edit, leaves really come to life now. VG says beautiful, and April says very pretty shot. Thank you. Right, okay. Next one I want to come to then is, well, we'll get to Nicola's second one. And then we'll move on to Robert's. Now, Nicola's second picture, let me see if I can find this. So, okay, and do that. So, Nicola said, where are we? Okay, let's flip back over. So, what we have here is, Nicola says, I took this while I was on a trip in Blackpool on a day trip. There were a lot of angled drain holes along the bottom of the sea wall looking out onto the beach. I decided then to stick my phone down to the ground and see what the camera came up with. The seawall was quite high, so I did have a bit of a fear of my phone disappearing down the drain and onto the beach, so maybe hurried the shot a bit too. The sun was going down and the light made it all quite interesting, I thought. I liked the concept of this shot, but I wasn't quite sure if the foreground should be in focus or the background or both. All I've done is cropped, straightened the horizon and warmed it up a bit, maybe too much, but still feel it's not really sitting with me comfortably. Okay. Now what she's also done is she has supplied the original. So if I just, so this is her original photo and this is her edited version. So you can see she's tilted, cropped, warmed it up a bit. And that's kind of as far as she's got. But the thing is that Nicola isn't quite sure whether it's still really delivering. So it's an interesting idea. I've seen this kind of thing. You're down at the beach, there's a sea wall, and there's little drainage holes down, just right down at pavement, sidewalk level that run down into the beach. And so she's taken her phone and she sort of plonked it down on the ground at level and just sort of taking a couple of photos just to sort of see what it looks like. And there's something in this, there's something fun in this idea. We've got the sun setting, we've got the, you know, beautiful clouds, a little bit of sea, sky, and the interesting inside of the drainage hole. Now, so I think there's definitely kind of feel like we're on to something. Okay, a couple of, what's this saying? April says this is cool looking. Lisa says I like this. Fiji says, oh, looks like the sea and the hills rolled up. Lovely capture. Frame within a frame shot. Lisa wonders whether maybe less foreground. Okay, so yes, what's going on here then is, whether it's frame within a frame or whether you're talking about more or less foreground as well, there's a similar kind of idea that it's a combination shot. It's a combination of what's inside the kind of the drainage pipe and the view on the other side of it. And The question is then, does this work, or does it work enough? And I think there's an interesting idea, but there's a sort of couple of places where it does feel like it's not quite delivering. And the key point here is that what's happening is the drainage hole, we know we're looking down a pipe. It's drawing our eye in, and then we've got a bit of a view at the end. But I don't know that there's enough of a view to really deliver something. It's like all the fingers are pointing here, but it's pointing to a relatively empty space. So, okay, I mean, if we go back to here, what would I do with this? I mean, because what's also clear as well is that your phone has focused on the foreground rather than the background. So the background is definitely, that little bit out of focus. And I think this is one where maybe, I don't know, but then if the foreground had been out of focus and the scene had been in focus, then I think it would have felt very blurry and we might not have been quite so sure what it was we were looking at either. In an ideal world, I think maybe you want both. But yes, so we straighten the horizon. We maybe kind of come in and make it a little bit more, make sure that this is definitely dead center, something like that. And maybe slightly more space at the base than the top. There we go. So that's kind of, I think, pretty much what you did. I've just shortened this slightly. So our attention gets drawn here. But for all the fact that I can go into here, I can go filter, I can maybe do the auto, I could maybe take the color, actually even drag that vibrance up a little bit. Say warm diffraction, perhaps we could, in the details, the optics, give it a little bit more of a vignette to again draw our attention to the view beyond. So we can do all this, and that kind of brings it up a little bit. The background is sort of or the view rather isn't quite so much in focus. So what I could do then is say I select this part of it. I'll tell you what, I'll just copy and paste that onto a separate layer. We could then again go to filter, let's say sharpen. Let's use the unsharp mask, which allows us to play around with different degrees of how much we want to sharpen it up. But the problem is because it's out of focus to begin with, there's a limit to how far we can sharpen it. And I can sharpen it like this, but it's kind of got to a level of it's a little bit false. It doesn't really feel like a naturally sharp. So it's now kind of looking a little bit more stuck on. So ultimately, I think the problem that we have is that there's a limit to what you can do with it. In an ideal world with something like this, what we need is another subject. And what we need, I think, is either you want ideally something like a boat moving past on the horizon. That would have been a good one. Or maybe what we want is something a little bit like this. So I'm obviously being a bit silly here, but that notion of it does look an awful lot like the beginning of the James Bond theme, where you're looking down the barrel of a gun. So sorry, couldn't actually resist that one. But in a way, for joking aside, the idea of actually having something at the end here like this does give you that focal point, does give you that point of something to look for, and it really brings home the idea, and it's why that opening scene in the James Bond movies works so well, is that the barrel of the gun that you're looking down just draws the eye. It's all leading lines. Everything's pointing towards that point and says, this is what you need to be looking at. Okay, that's how that works. And when we remove it, there's a nice sort of bit of sunset, but there's not enough in it. Maybe if the actual sun was in there, maybe if there were sun rays there, but like I say, you kind of need a figure or a boat or some other kind of subject. And I think if you were to do that, that would then just elevate the whole photo, and that's where it would work at its best. Or just somebody walking their dog on the beach in the background, I think would just make it work. So I hope that all makes sense to you there. Okay, a couple of other comments. What have we got here? Oh, Marcy joins us and says good morning. Hi, Marcy. Glad you could make it. And Lisa suggests that a composite would be great. You can. I think there is a thing here though that when you've got to kind of think very carefully about what you would place in it, and it would need to kind of look natural. Okay, you've got to be very careful about something just looking very stuck on like that. VG says subject is good. I wish we could make James Bond appear a bit more, and it would be perfect. Yeah. Right. Okay. So thank you for sending that in, Nicola. Hope these things have given you some kind of interesting ideas. So, quick little reminder then that if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, and you would like to support them, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. Of course, don't forget to, like I say, click like on the video. Subscribe if you haven't already done it. Invite your friends along as well. If you like photography and you're getting something out of this, you may well know somebody else who would like photography and get something out of these podcasts too. Let them know about it. Now, if you are wanting to send in images for feedback or for any of the challenges that we do, then you can, there's three ways of basically doing it. You can either email me, up here, it's in my website, kimayres.co.uk. So kim@kimayres.co.uk. Email me the image directly, and if you're sending me a slightly larger file or you want raw file or something, that's probably the best way to do it. If you're just sending a basic JPEG or something, then we've got a couple of groups we can do. We've got the Flickr group and we've got the Facebook group. Both of these are flickr.com or facebook.com/groups/UPwKA, which is just the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. So stick your photo in or email me your photo. Tell me something about the photo. Tell me what it is you're struggling with. Tell me what you were hoping to try and achieve with it. And then, as you can see with this, I can think allows me to start saying, well, okay, maybe we could do this. Maybe we could do that. Give you a few ideas of how to either fix the photo or understand how you might approach it if you come across a similar subject in the future. Right, okay, so stick around. I'm now going to move on to Robert, and then I will be telling you all what's coming up this month. So don't run away. So now then, okay, let's move on to Robert. Now, if I double click on here, Robert sent through this image. And Robert said, this is a photo I took in Mainz, Germany in March. It is a Fasching or carnival celebration. People are dressed up in costumes. There are lots of festivals and parties during this time. I captured these people in historic regalia. It's not the best background or lighting. I've been editing it periodically over the past few months and have not been satisfied. Let me know what you think and if you have any suggestions on improving it. Thank you for your help and time. Okay, so what we have then is we've got three people here in costume walking out on the street, and clearly it's the kind of thing you want to capture with your camera. You go click, but it's not giving really. I mean, it's fine as a captured for your memory kind of shot, but it doesn't have the same kind of impact necessarily of a, would you stick it in for a competition for street photography or nostalgia or vintage or something like that? Possibly not. Now, what Robert's done is he's also very handily sent me in the original. And here we can see the original. That's doing a funny thing. Not sure quite why it's doing that. So I'll tell you what, let's just open it in Photoshop. So come over here. Right, so we've got the picture now in, it's opened up in Camera Raw. And what we can see here is it's a much larger, it says there's more space. Robert had obviously kind of cropped in fact, I said, well, let's just go back to here. So we can see, and in Robert's original one, he's cropped out some of the bits on the left, cropped out some of the bits on the right. He's lightened the figures in the foreground. He's tried sort of darkening down the background, all the stuff which is, a good place to start, generally speaking. But if I take this back down, what we can also see, so let's click auto so we can just sort of see things a little bit brighter. Well, it's brightened up a little bit, but it's not actually done huge amounts. It's still feeling fairly dark. And what I'd also noticed then is that there's a fourth figure who's looking at his phone. We've got woman in the background in a thick warm coat, man sitting there in the background as well, somebody in the background here. Also, we've got what looks like probably father and daughter in the foreground here. And if we flick back over to Robert's picture here, what we can see is he's carefully tried to remove all these extra bits. And Photoshop is full of various bits that, you can remove by using your by cloning out different, using take one part of the wall and paint it over another part of the wall and remove people that way. Or there's a lot of various kind of generative fill remove things. The problem is with some of those is that they don't always work that great. And what we find is, oh, where am I going? Wasn't meaning to do that. Sorry, I just opened up the rock. Right, okay. Yep, so what we find is that this patch, like this patch up here, which just hasn't quite worked. There's something funny going on over here where it's done a replacement. These hands are looking like they've been sort of slightly blurred and falsified. The background, we can see this looks like something's been cut out and replaced, and the edges don't quite work. It's one of those things that sometimes there are certain things that these kind of generative fill will work really well with, and some of them don't. Some of them really struggle with. It's not a clear and obvious thing. It's not always getting what you want out of it. So if we go back to here, I think the first thing we need to do is just let's just lighten the whole thing up a bit more so that we can really see what's going on. And I think that's okay. Well, but now what we notice then is there's other kind of stories going on. I'll tell you what, detail, I'll just up the luminance a little bit because it is going to be quite noisy at this level. We can see there's a little bit of motion blur here because they're also, they're also walking, and but anyway, let's bring up the luminance. I'll not do the full denoise because that will take another, amount of time, but let's open it and, right, oh, where have we gone? Over here, do that, close that, and I'll just close those ones of Nicola's there so that I'm not, right, okay. So what Robert did was, the first thing that he did with this crop was essentially cropped out the guy looking at his phone and sort of ended up with something like this. But then we've got the wee girl's arm in the foreground, we've got these people in the background, we've got this person in the background. So then he's used the various kind of film. But the problem is I think, let's come back to this notion of narrative. What is this story about? And find what you think you're seeing is 3 people in period costume. And that's kind of interesting. Well, let's get a picture of 3 people in period costume. However, what you're really seeing is 3 people in period costume on a busy well, not busy, but on a high street, in a street in the town. And actually, it's that's the story. Because if you're wanting to isolate these people and give them a different background, maybe you cut them out and you stick them against the background of a 17th century town in Germany or something, then fine. But that's a different kind of picture. What this is about people who are in this space. And actually there's another part of the narrative here is, I think that when we look at this guy here, he's clearly glancing down at this couple, the father and daughter here. And I think that's kind of part of the story. And when you look at this, it is about these people and they're in a town situation. And I really quite like the fact that this guy is looking at his phone as well. That kind of becomes part of it. So in a way, my idea isn't just to crop these 3 out, because in themselves, they're not enough of a story. To go back to, let's just take a quick look back at this picture again. It's okay, you've got the 3 of them there, you've caught them, that's all right. But if we're talking about really trying to up the narrative, up the intensity of the idea, then we need something else. And what that something else is actually what's already there, which is the fact that they're on the street and there's a little bit of interaction going, and there's a bit of non-interaction going over here. And so what I would be more tempted to do is, rather than go for that portrait crop, actually, why not go for a slightly more landscape crop? In fact, you could even come down, make it even sort of, well, if you really want, let's go sort of cinematic, I think. Just pull that in a little bit like that, get these people here. And something like, well, okay, let's pull that out a little bit. Okay, slightly less room on that. But I quite like that idea of sort of slightly more cinematic crop. Something like that could even work. Or at the very least, I think if we kind of kept the normal ratios and just brought that in a bit, something like that. And this is where we've got our key. So kind of normal style photo, something like that. Now, at this point, the fact that we've got people in the background are part of the scene. I would say the biggest distraction really is the writing up on here, and this is being bright yellow is there to capture all the attention. But also the green there, that kind of lime green, is also capturing the attention as well. So it looks like I've certainly got a bunch of comments come up at the same time. So what have we got? April says it's hard to make photos like this when it's crowded. Meg says I really like the shadows on the ground with the people. April also quite likes the cinematic look. Yeah, there's shadows down here. Part of the backlight is working. But I think with this, what I'd be more tempted to do is try and tone down that. Now we can go in and try and sort of remove. We can use all the remove tools or whatever. But I think what we could also do is quite simply, if I take a hue saturation, and I'm going to just desaturate the colours back here. So I'll start off with the sort of yellow. Now, if I desaturate all the yellow, yeah, that's not bad, you see. And that's kind of, that darkens down these bits here. And in fact, I can even darken them down a little bit more, and they kind of disappear into the background. Now, the problem is at this point, we've lost all the brilliant yellows in the rest of the picture. So all we do is make sure we've got black here. I'll use the fill that in, everything comes back. Take the paintbrush, turn that to white, and just paint it in over. So we're only getting the effect in that corner rather than across the whole picture. Now we've got that. Actually, there's a little line here which is very, very close, which I'm slightly less happy with. So I can either try and remove that, or actually I will, if I just crop in a fraction more, something like that, I think, just to get rid of that so it's not grabbing my attention. Now we've got this, I think at this point, oh no, not wanting James Bond, right. Put this onto a fresh one. Now we can go to camera raw filter. I think again, maybe give it a little bit of a vignette just to kind of draw attention more into the people in the middle. If I click auto, that's maybe bring it up a bit, but perhaps maybe we want a little bit more contrast. Maybe we don't want it quite as bright, all those whites so high, not sure. You can plan to play, yeah, you bring those shadows down a little bit here. I want a little bit more contrast, something like that. And now I think we're kind of moving into the realms of sort of something more interesting. Again, what we could do is sort of loosely darken the background a little bit more. Again, using the masking, just brighten up our figures in the foreground, something like this. I'll keep the contrast there where the shadows are, as Meg said, they kind of add to a sense of what's going on. And now I think we've kind of got a slightly more interesting photo. Now we could maybe brighten these people up a little bit more. In fact, actually, if I go to here, let's just do select subject for a moment. And if I'm really lucky, it might just actually select the people in the foreground. Never a guarantee with this. Okay, it's also selected these people over here, but that's not bad. Okay, so now I don't want the selection. So I'll hold down the Alt key and just deselect the person in the back there, because we're not needing them, but it has kind of selected everybody else. That's fine. And now if I go to select inverse, that selects the background. Now if I can again grab the curves and I can darken down the background but leave the people in the foreground. What I could also do, I'll duplicate that for a moment and invert that, remove that. What I could also do is lighten up the people. Now, I've got to be careful here because then it goes too much and it just looks stuck on, but I can just get a little bit of a nudge, something like that. So having selected off the people, we can lighten the people and we can darken the background a little bit more. And ultimately then we now end up with a picture where we can see the people who are what this is about. But it's not, like I say, it's not just about the three people. It's about the three people in a modern town setting. And the fact that this guy over here has even got his phone. So I hope that makes sense, Robert. And ultimately, I think it comes back to this idea again, that ultimately what it's about is trying to identify what is the narrative. And very often we see something and we go, okay, that's what the picture is about. The picture is about this subject. But it's not just about this subject. It's about how this subject interacts with the environment. Now, sometimes the environment is maybe kind of getting in the way, distracting, a little bit like, you know, the bright patches of the white patches of bokeh in Nicola's photo. Or sometimes, you know, actually the background becomes a part of the feature. You can't avoid the fact that these people are in the town. So the idea then is lean into it, actually make more of the fact that they're in the town, allow them to be in the town, and then allow this father and daughter here to actually become a feature of, so I'm saying here, but this here, over here on the left, the father and daughter, actually become a feature of it by allowing then that the fact that the guy on the left is looking at them. So ultimately then, like I say, the key thing here is to find the narrative, understand the narrative, or look for alternative narratives which actually fit the situation better. Sometimes the photo just isn't going to quite work. It's nearly there. Look, Nicola's idea of going down the drain pipe out to sea, it's a lovely, lovely idea, but you're just missing that key ingredient of actually having the very thing that your eye is being drawn to here, like fingers going, look, 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 look. But then there's nothing to look at that matches up to the strength and the loudness of the look. When somebody goes, oh my God, look there, you're expecting to see something a little bit more amazing, not just a little bit of landscape or seascape. If it's mildly casual, oh, that's kind of interesting. Oh, well, that's okay. But when you've got like this loud noise of look over here, then you need something bigger to deliver. And when you've got that looking down the drain pipe, you need something more to see. So like the boat going past, the person walking their dog, or James Bond. Similarly then with this photo of Robert's, what we're trying to do then is say, okay, we've got these people, but it's not, the people on them by themselves are not enough. What's making the story is the fact that these people are dressed in period costume, but they're right in a high street and there's other people looking at them, and it is part of the carnival or whatever that you're going to see these things. So I hope that all makes sense. But thanks ever so much for sending that in. Where are we at? VG reckons that the vignette helps to bring out the focus on the people watching. The people walking, rather. Okay. So where are we at? Okay, so that's it for the feedback session. So what we've got now is what's coming up in the next few weeks. So what we talked about then was like I say, Robert won the Smug Points accumulation for October. And after a little bit of back and forth and a couple of different ideas, he's decided he wants the challenge to be Selective Colour. Now, anybody who's been watching these for the last 5 years and knows me knows that I tend to have a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction against the idea of Selective Colour. Basically because it's, by and large, done to death badly. Okay, so Selective Colour basically is where you have your whole image is black and white, but then you have one spot of colour or one particular colour is allowed to stand out. So black and white and a red, or black and white and a bit of yellow. And so often it's done really badly. And it's done badly so often that I tend to avoid it. I have occasionally done one or two things for online competitions, but generally I try to avoid it. But Robert's point was, well, okay then, Kim, show us how to do it better. And well, yeah, okay, I'll try and write a challenge. So what I'm going to do is next week I'm going to talk about selective colour. I'm going to talk about what it is, how to make it happen in your editing software, and when and where to use it to maximize the effectiveness. Because in the end, most of you are also on competition sites like PhotoCrowd, Guru Shots, Viewbug, what have you, where on a regular basis, some kind of selective colour, spot colour challenge turns up. So if you want to be able to learn how to do better than the other people and sort of get there up in the kind of top 10%, then understanding how to make it effective is not a bad thing to have in your toolbox. So I'm going to talk about that next week, and then I will set the challenge for either 2 or 3 weeks after that to and you can have a go at doing a spot colour yourself, and we'll just see how everybody gets on with it, see who's been listening to what I've been talking about. But like I say, it's normally I would space the bits in between with another feedback session, and I will have a couple of feedback sessions next week. But we do have, like I say, a 5 Sunday or 5 podcast month. So this is place for another one. And what I'm going to do with that was another idea that Robert had, which is tilt shift. And tilt shift is an effect you use in editing where you essentially, it kind of like miniaturizes something. So you might have a scene in a town, you might have a scene in an airport, you might have a scene at a beach, and basically it looks like it's like little toy planes or toy people or a toy town. And there's a specific editing technique that you can do to create it. Now, that was in fact Robert's original suggestion on maybe that could be the challenge. The problem is that because it's very much based in a slightly more complex editing technique, I didn't feel that was overly fair on anybody who wanted to join in. I think the spot colour is slightly different because actually even a lot of phones these days in their quick editing allow you to do spot colour. But the tilt shift is a slightly more complicated one, but at the same time it's another one which sometimes turns up in these competitions, in these challenges. And Robert was really keen to kind of for me to dig a bit more deep into that. So I said, well, okay, I'll do it, but not as a challenge. So but basically next week then we will be doing the spot color. The week after I will do a talk about tilt shift. The week after that I will have a feedback session, and then the week after that we'll have the challenge for you to send in your spot colour photos. Then there will be a final week which I'll probably do a feedback session for again. So that's pretty much November laid out for you. What else have we got? Oh, Lisa says, a new skill set for me to learn. Marcy says, tilt shift lenses are fun for about half an hour. Probably just me, but I got over it quick. I think there's a level of that. I do know what you mean. It's a trick, and when you first come across it, it's quite fun. I think after a while it can wear off, but at the same time, sometimes you come across a photo, you've got a particular photo in your collection where you go, you know what, that one might just work. And it's more about for these competitions, these challenges which you see in these online sites where they're asking for them, and part of the challenge, I think, just is sometimes to kind of dig through your archives and see if you can find something that will impress. It's not necessarily something you would put into your camera club competition or necessarily something you would want to print up and put on the wall, but sometimes we just want to have a little bit of fun with a competition that we found online. So that's what we've got coming up. I hope that all makes sense. So once again, thank you to Robert and to Nicola for sending in their images. If you would like to support these podcasts, buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. And of course, don't forget to invite your friends, click like on the video as well, and tell everybody all about these things. Get along a few more people. And I think that pretty much brings us to a close. So thank you again, and not just to Nicola and Robert, but to everybody here who has left a comment, said hello, give me feedback, and don't forget you're accumulating smug points for November. Just by leaving a comment here, you've automatically got 5 smug points. If you send in an image for feedback, you get 25 smug points. Send in an image for a challenge, you get 10 smug points. And if you get the most smug points across the course of the month, you get to choose what the challenge and topic will be for the following month. So lots of reasons to get involved. Okay, that's the last few people saying thank you, and we'll see you all next week with luck. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.